I'd like to call the meeting to order. If you could please rise and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Ms. Pollier.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Clerk, please call the roll.
Greenberg.
Here.
Hicks.
Here.
Mako.
Here.
Pollier. Here. Chapaka. Here. Suriano.
Here.
Tamarkin.
Here.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, additions or corrections. Do we have any additions to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting?
So moved by Hicks.
We have a motion by Mr. Hicks. Do we have a second?
Second by Pollier.
Second by Pollier. Any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Hicks.
Yes.
Pollier.
Yes.
Mako.
Yes.
Chapaka.
Yes.
Suriano.
Yes.
Tamarkin.
Yes.
Greenberg.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the administering of oath. I will turn it over to this Assistant City Attorney, Mr. Roth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are now at the public hearing portion of the meeting. The public hearing will operate as follows. Administrative staff will make a presentation or comment on the application. The applicant or their representative may then make a presentation or comment on the application. The applicant has 10 minutes to present, and additional time may be requested. Permission is at the discretion of the chair. Public comment will then be open for 3 minutes allowed per speaker. Additional time may be requested. Permission is at the discretion of the chair. Speakers must complete a speaker slip and come to the podium and state their name and address. The applicant will then be given 10 minutes to comment. Additional time may be requested. Permission is at the discretion of the chair. If there is more than one application pending for a particular address, the presentation on each application may be consolidated and presented as one. At this time, will persons wishing to present testimony this evening please rise and raise your right hand to be sworn in? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, state I do. I do. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Roth. Next on the agenda is going to be applications and public comment. The first case we have is a variance case, and I will read this into the record. We have case V-0019-2024 to consider a variance application to vary sections 1109.05E1A and B, fences location of the codified ordinances of the City of Gahanna for property located at 374 Muskingum Drive, parcel ID 025-001741. Current zoning R3, small lot residential. Kate McKernan, applicant. I'll recognize Mr. Blackford for a presentation.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chair. Michael Blackford, Director of Planning, covering all the items on tonight's agenda, as unfortunately Maddie is out sick tonight, so I will do my best to answer any questions that you have. Our first item, as you stated, is a variance request for a fence. On the screen right now is the location and zoning map, and everything you see here in the light brown, this is zoned R3, so this is under our new zoning code. First couple applications are under the new code. Second half of the agenda is under the old code, just to make it a little bit more confusing for everyone here tonight. So 2 things of relevancy with the R3 zoning as it relates to fencing. The most relevant would be the front yard setback. There is a 25-foot setback, front yard setback for R3. The other is the minimum lot size. The minimum lot size is 6,000 square feet. This particular lot is about 10,000 square feet. I believe the applicant's materials stated that they needed the extra room because of the lot. So the lot is substantially larger than the minimum lot size, but we often see on corner lots that because of the configuration, a lot of the yard isn't as usable as a standard lot. The one zoning here that's a little bit different, this is in light blue here, this is restricted institutional. That is Goshen Lane elementary school there. In this location right here. So the request before us tonight is they would like a fence in the front yard. So our new zoning code does not permit fences in the front yard. To be honest, that was an oversight. You all may recall, or some of you may recall, I'll just go back in history of our fence code. So about the first 60, 65 years of Gahanna, privacy fences were not allowed in the side or the front yard. It was about 2021 when, after plethora of variances and that, Gahanna, we decided to change our rules, and we allowed a privacy fence in the side yard, and we allowed a privacy fence in the second front yard. At that particular time, most of our residential zonings required a 35-foot setback. So with the code that was adopted May 1st, the front yard setbacks were reduced substantially from 35 feet to 25 feet. However, we didn't carry forward, and again, this was an inadvertent omission on staff's part, didn't carry forward the reduced setback for the second front yard of a corner lot. So if this application was made, let's say at the start of the year, I know we have new property owners, they couldn't have made that request, but if somebody did, the code at that point in time would have said 35-foot front yard, and you could have that cut in half, so 17 and a half feet. If I did my job better than what I did and carried forward that language with the 25-foot front yard, they would be allowed 12 and a half feet. But they are requesting a setback of about 8 and a half feet to what they're requesting. Here's a site plan. Left side of your screen is the south side of the property. This would be the front of the house. This is where their driveway, so this would be the side yard, or what looks like a side yard, functions like a side yard, but from a zoning standpoint is a front yard. Here in red is the approximate location of the setback. Again, this is the new setback, the 25-foot setback, not the 35-foot setback that was previously required. And here in yellow is the approximate location of the fence. One thing that I would share with you is that this particular application was a result of some code enforcement action. The city, we did receive a complaint from a adjoining property owner, a neighboring property owner, about the fence, and that concern, or that caller was concerned with the view and the site triangles that this created. I can tell you that this has been reviewed by our engineering team, and it meets site triangles. But again, I'd just like to point out that this came before us because of some visibility concerns. Here are some pictures that the applicant was kind enough to provide for us. This is looking at the home, and here's the fence as it was being constructed, and here's a view from the stop sign, and you can see the fence in this location. I know their application package contained a number of other photos that showed some corner lot fencing in and around this particular area. I can say that I looked at those, and I know they didn't have addresses and such, but it looked like about 2/3 of those would have met code at the time when they were installed. I was able to check on a permit for 1 or 2 of those, and they did have permitting, but certainly there were 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 examples that were, not consistent with code. So again, there's 2 variance sections that they're requesting from. The first is same section of code, but it's the restriction on privacy fences are prohibited in the front yard and cannot extend beyond the front of the house. And again, that was code language that was in existence prior to late 2021. And the fence is both within the front yard and extends beyond the front house. So without this variance, where they could put the fence is really right here at the corner of the house. So they couldn't even meet the 30-foot line because the 20-foot setback, because the house is built off of that property line. The variance criteria, variance is not likely to result in substantial damage to the essential character of the neighborhood. This is what Planning Commission considers with the grant with conditions, or to deny. The variance is not likely to result in damage to adjoining properties. I would also probably point out there's no concerns from environmental impacts. This really doesn't result in any economical type of issues, and the land use plan doesn't really speak to fencing. Staff, we do recommend approval, but we would recommend approval with condition. And that's kind of marrying up the two codes, the previous code and the code that's in place at this time. And that would be a 50% reduction from the front yard, which again is 25 feet. That would be down to 12.5 feet. That would be our recommendation. The 8-9 feet that they're requesting, I'm not familiar with any requests of that nature. It looks like there was, remember this one just from a couple of months ago where there was a similar request. Code was 17.5 feet. They asked for 8 or 9 feet, and 15 feet was granted. So there is some recent precedent set on this type of issue. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, Mr. Blackford. We'll now open public comment. Would the applicant like to comment? If you could state your name, address, and if you could please speak right into the microphone, that'd be great.
Hello, my name is Kate McCachran. I live at 374 Muskingum Drive. Just want to say I hope everyone is having a great day today. I again wanted to apologize for building the fence without getting a permit. We were advised that this isn't something you really needed, but we learned the hard way. We are first-time homeowners who had a goal to find a home in this wonderful city of Gahanna, and we feel so lucky to have been able to find our home in the city we fell in love with. The only thing this house didn't check off our list was a fenced-in yard. We knew building a fence was going to be one of the first projects we wanted to take on. We truly had no idea during this process that we were building a fence on our front lawn. We believed this was a side lawn, as it is the side of our house where there are no entrances to go in and out of the house. And when you do a simple Google search, front lawns are generally just where the mailboxes and front door are. And we had none of that on this side of the house. And we purposely didn't bring the fence all the way to the front of the house to keep it out of what we believe is our only front yard. And when building this fence, we truly tried to keep it a great distance away from the sidewalk. But we also still wanted most of our yard fenced in. We even made sure to talk with the neighbor and keep the fence, and we purposely kept the fence a couple feet off the property line to please them, even though they already have an existing fence on the property line. We just really wanted our dog to finally have a decent-sized yard to enjoy, as he very much deserves it. We also wanted to grow our future family here with our kids to have a big enough yard to grow in and play in. And truly, where the fence is wanted, it will take so much of our yard, as that side of the house wouldn't be used by us if it wasn't fenced in. We have truly put a lot of hard work and money, not only into the fence as we built it ourselves, but also into the home as to make it into something that we love and for the neighbors to find nice to look at. And we have gotten a lot of compliments from neighbors about the house and the fence. We just please ask to let us keep the fence. It truly does not harm anyone. We know there are other corner lots with fences in their front yards, as shown in some of the documents I sent in, from going around the city and taking pictures of fences without trying to upset the people of Gahanna. So again, we are truly sorry for starting the process without a permit, but we would greatly appreciate if we could enjoy our fence so we could enjoy our full property, and so can our dog Oscar.
Okay. Thank you very much. I did not receive any speaker slips. I do want to make note that there was one neighbor comment that was received via email, so hopefully commission members have that, and just want to state that for the record. So with that, I will close public comment and open it up to questions for the commission. Starting on my left, Mr. Chapaka.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Kate, how big of a dog do you have?
He's about 50 pounds, medium size.
So typically our fence is to face the front, and I understand you're saying you didn't really comprehend the two fronts. It's more of an ornamental fence, it's only 4 foot high. Is that a consideration to make a solid 4-foot fence instead of a?
We are okay with cutting it if like that, because it would be much easier than having to move it back.
Okay. Thank you. No other questions, Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chapaka. Ms. Pollier.
Yes, thank you. You said you built this fence yourself.
Yes.
Did you consult with a contractor or any
anyone that had any kind of experience with fences or getting fence permits or anything like that prior to starting the project?
No, we just looked at YouTube, and from prior landscaping work, done some fences on my own before.
Okay. I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Paulet. Mr. Hicks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. McCarron, sorry for messing your name up.
It's a hard one. It's McCachran.
You attached a number of pictures of fences to your application. Can you help us out with what was your intent with submitting those?
For us to build the fence, we originally went around the city to just see what other people had. And that's where we were under the assumption it was okay to bring our fence over there because we saw other people of the city had it, especially when we were going through the home buying process, seeing all the other neighborhoods. We were just trying to see what we could and couldn't do. I mean, I read on the website it couldn't be in your front yard, and that was the main thing. And again, we just assumed this was not our front yard.
You're not alone in that. There are a number of corner lots that have been before us for this same issue. You answered Mr. Shapaka's question with, you would, well, let me ask you, are you opposed to moving the fence further away from the increasing the setback? Are you opposed to that?
Yes, only because of the amount of work and money it will take to do that.
So you had answered him that you would consider lowering the fence.
100% yes.
Okay, but moving it is not something that you're open to at this time, unless, like, voluntarily open to.
Yeah,
Okay.
unless I won the lottery somehow.
Understood. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Mr. Greenberg?
Mr. Hicks asked my question, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg. Mr. Siriano?
Maybe a question for Mr. Blackford. If the fence were lowered to 4 feet, does the setback, does the stipulation still apply?
Yes. Yeah, so they would still need the same variances in the same location and all that. Yep.
Okay, that's my question. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Siriano. Mr. Tamarkin?
I have no questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tamarkin. I just have actually two quick questions. So what type of cost are we talking about, roughly? Let's say just in terms of construction.
Probably at least 500. I mean, maybe 300 to 400 on getting more materials. Would have to get full new posts and whatnot. And the primary reason we did it ourselves was to save money, but applying for this variance and all that stuff has kind of dwindled what we could put into our house and this project.
Okay, kind of along that same vein, approximately how long did it take it to construct the fence?
2 days.
2 days. And other than what we've received in terms of neighbor comments, any other feedback from your neighbors on this?
We know our one neighbor is scared of our dog, so that's why we tried building the fence as quickly as possible, because she's asked us to build a fence. And then our other neighbors all fully are okay with it. They love it. They love all the work we've done with the house. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Those complete my questions. So, any other questions from the commission? Okay, seeing none, do we have a motion to approve case V-0019-2024?
Mr. Chair, I move for approval of variance 0019-2024 to consider a variance application for the fence located at 374 Muskingum Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg. We have a motion by Mr. Greenberg. Do we have a second?
Second, Shapaka.
Second by Mr. Shapaka. So we have a motion by Greenberg, a second by Shapaka. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to put a condition on there. I'm in favor of the fence where it's at. I'd like to see the 12.5 foot, but I think that if it looks like it fits the condition, the corner condition, The neighbors haven't complained about it. The 6-foot-high fence, I think if we can lower that to 4 feet in what I would consider the front, what she's saying is the side. So it would come out of the house perpendicular, go along the road, and then back to pretty much the other house that's there would be 4 foot, then the 6 foot could come back into play. So however we can get that condition put in to this approval. If I need to make a motion to do that, if there's other opinions about it.
Okay. Let's have some comments and then we can revisit that, okay? Ms. Polly, any comment?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Mr. Chapaka on that. I also think that if we're going to approve this, I would be in favor of it if the fence could be located, as the staff recommended, 12.5 feet from the property line, instead of the requested 8 feet. I would also be, more in favor of lowering the height as well, from 6 foot to 4 foot, if possible. You know, I typically don't like to approve variance applications where someone did not seek any guidance from the city as to whether or not they needed a permit, given that we live in a city, and that there's rules and requirements. But I understand, you know, being first-time home buyers, this was something that you didn't realize you had to do. Now you'll know. But, so yeah, I mean, I think in general, I think I would be in favor with those stipulations.
Thank you, Ms. Polly. Mr. Hicks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In reviewing the criteria that we use to grant variances, all of the criteria about it not being likely that it's going to have an adverse effect, I'm in support of all of those. It's the fifth one is this necessary that I'm kind of struggling with. To me, the height doesn't really matter. To me, that's more of a design question, not a zoning. So whether it was 4 feet or 6 feet, I'm indifferent to. But it's the administration's request of the setback that I would be interested in considering. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Mr. Greenberg?
I too would be in favor of the city's setback for the variance. We recently met as a group and went through another fence variance application. There was lots of discussion about it, and we made a reduction to the request at that time, and I think we should be consistent and not set precedents all different feet all over the map. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg. Mr. Siriano?
I won't add anything additional to my colleagues, but just say that I would agree with the staff recommendation of the 12.5 feet.
Thank you, Mr. Siriano. Mr. Markin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, kind of following up on Mr. Greenberg, I think it's very important for our commission to be consistent throughout the city as best we can. And consistently, I am also not bothered by the height. We have approved side yard fences that are 6 foot tall. So that does not bother me, but we have not approved anything as close to the street as 8 foot. So that does bother me. And again, it's kind of a precedent that I would not like to start setting. So I will be in favor of the city's recommendation of 12.5 feet, but not in favor of the 8 feet.
Thank you, Mr. Markin. And I'm going to be in agreement with, I think, what's been said. I think trying to go for a full variance request of this would be a little bit too much. And again, I think we have to be consistent with what we've done in the past. So I'm in agreement with the comments of my colleagues. So that being said, I believe we'd have to, if we want to, I guess from what I'm hearing, if we want to make it.
Vote for a condition.
What's that?
You vote for a condition?
We already have a motion and a second for it as proposed, so we need to
Vacate.
withdraw that.
Yep.
Then make a second motion with a 12.5 foot setback condition, and then vote on that, I would think.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to vacate the first motion, which was motioned and seconded. So is there a motion? To,
So
Withdraw the previous
I'll
motion.
withdraw the previous motion and let Mr.
We'll withdraw the second.
okay. Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Greenberg and a second by Mr. Chapaka to remove the first motion. Clerk, please call the roll.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Chapaka,
Yes.
Mako,
Yes.
Pollyea,
Yes.
Suriano,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Motion passes. So now, do I have a new motion to approve the variance based upon the staff recommendation of a 12.5-foot setback?
So moved.
So I have a motion by Mr. Greenberg. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Chapaka. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Chapaka,
Yes.
Mako,
Yes.
Pollyea,
Yes.
Suriano,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Motion passes.
So I just gotta follow it, the 12.5 feet back, and we're all good though?
Correct.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, next case, is going to be a final plat application. And I'll read this into the record. We have FP-0003-2024 to recommend to City Council final plat application for 530 Tech Center Drive consisting of 14.96 acres, parcel ID 025-013767, current zoning, GC General Commercial, Crescent Woods LLC, Griffin Caldwell applicant. And I will turn it over to Mr. Blackford for a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Here's a piece of property that might look familiar to the Planning Commission. We've had a couple of applications on this site here the last few months, and what we're here to talk about tonight is this general location. This is the Crescent at Central Park. As you stated, Mr. Chair, it is Zone GC, which is General Commercial. Here in brown, this is R4, that's multifamily. But unlike most of our applications, we're not talking about a use or a new development. This is a plat. Planning Commission saw a plat, I believe it was back in April, that showed the configuration that you see here on your screen. But tonight, we're just talking about this area in blue. And this area in blue was recently, at least a portion of it, one of the two lots that are being created, was recently before Planning Commission for a gas station. Unlike most of our requests the Planning Commission sees, this is a recommendation to council. There is some project history in addition to what I just talked about. There was a preliminary plat last year and a final plat. Creating two lots, a 3-acre lot, an 11-plus acre lot, that would be an administrative approval. However, our friends at the state have requirements that if you do a public road, that has to be platted, hence why we're here tonight. Otherwise, this would have been an administrative application. When we're reviewing for this, there's some technical elements that our engineering team looks at. From a zoning standpoint, it's really lot size and frontage. Pretty easy to meet when you have 14 acres and you're only creating two lots. I know this doesn't show up real well, but you can kind of see the outline in here. This is the 14 or so acres. This is where the gas station was that was approved there just a month or two ago. This is the loop road, and this is the road that is a public road, and that's why we're here tonight. So that does leave about 11 acres of future development. There might be parcel splits in the future, don't know. Those will probably qualify for administrative approval. So not a whole bunch of code or items to go through since there's no development proposal really to look at. The approval criteria that Planning Commission has for plats, it says that you all should be recommending approval of this to council unless you find that granting the application will adversely affect the health, safety, and people living and working in that area. If we were to look at go back to the location map, we would see that these parcels are certainly in character with development in that area, and staff wouldn't see any issues there. Granting of the application would be detrimental to the public welfare, granting the application will be contradictory to existing development standards. Again, these lot sizes are larger than what we see just on the, I go back here, let me look at this, and we got the ditch that runs through the middle of the property, this east side. These lots are the same size or larger than what we see in this general area. It's certainly, they're all larger than what we see just to the north in some of our commercial areas. So again, staff's opinion is that this meets all applicable code. It's been looked at by staff. There's no unresolved comments. There's no variances. And that's why planning staff recommends approval. Turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blackford. Now open it up to public comment. Would the applicant like to comment? Again, if you could state your name, address, in association with the project.
Griffin Caldwell, address 250 Civic Center Drive, Columbus, Ohio, 43215, and then an authorized representative of the developer.
Okay.
I have no further comment. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Okay, great. And we did not receive any speaker slips, so we will now close the public comment and open it up to questions from the commission. Starting on my left, Mr. Shapaka.
No comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Shapaka. Ms. Paulier?
Same, no questions, no comments.
Thank you, Ms. Paulier. Mr. Hicks?
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Mr. Greenberg?
No comment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Greenberg. Mr. Siriano?
No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Siriano. Mr. Tamarkin?
No questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tamarkin. And I also have no questions or comments. So with that, do we have a motion to approve FP-0003-2024?
Mr. Chair, I move to recommend to council item FP-0003-2024.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Siriano. Do we have a second?
Second, Tamarkin.
Thank you to Mr. Tamarkin. We have a motion by Mr. Siriano and a second by Mr. Tamarkin. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none. Clerk, please call the roll.
Soriano,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
Yes.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Hicks,
Yes.
Mako,
Yes,
Polly,
Yes.
Shapaka.
Yes.
motion passes. Okay, next item on the agenda is another variance application, and I'll read this into the record. We have case V-0020-2024 to consider a variance application of various sections 1165.08B8, permanent signs, and 1165.09A, 3C, freestanding signs of the codified ordinances of the city of Gahanna for property located at 1195 Technology Drive, parcel ID 025-008886, current zoning OCT, Rosen USA Inc., Brian Brooks applicant, and I will turn it over to Mr. Blackford for a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now we're into the part of our agenda that is the old zoning code, so different look and feel to the zoning map and the zoning designations. In this case, everything you see on your screen is zoned OCT, which is Office Commerce Technology. That would be Innovation and Manufacturing, IM, in the new zoning code. Signage and zoning designations go hand in hand, but really it's not so much the zoning that really comes into play on this particular request. I would say it's probably more what's relevant on your screen is the particular roadway. So this is Technology Drive. It's very obviously, it's a cul-de-sac. There's 5 lots on this particular property. This lot right here is Rosen as well as this site. So they're developed on both these properties. There's a total of 4 commercial entities in this location, and there's only one other user at the end of this cul-de-sac. And that's relevant because what we're here tonight is a variance related to signage. And there's 3 variances that'll be necessary. Just waiting for, there we go. 3 variances that are necessary in order to permit 2 monument signs. There's 1 monument sign out there existing, and I believe that's being removed. So this would be 1 new additional monument sign, 2 total. So our code allows 1 monument sign per 500 square feet of frontage So based on the frontage of this site, they're only allowed one. And the signs are less than 15 feet from the right-of-way. And I think we have an exhibit coming up that shows just where those signs are, but one sign is just under 10 feet. The other one's 2.5 feet from the right-of-way. The other variance is to the landscaping requirement around a monument sign. I believe they provided, the applicant has some information. They could probably expand on this a little better than I could about the logistics there with the sidewalk and some existing mature trees and the limited amount of space that they have to plant. So that's why they're asking for that particular variance. Here's a little schematic here. This is Technology Drive. You can see the cul-de-sac in this location. This drive down here, there is a sign. You can see it barely up there, right next to it here. It's about 2.5 feet. Their exhibit, I believe this shows the site triangle, that it's outside of the site triangle there. So from our good folks at engineering, there's no issues with the placement of this particular sign. And then you can also see with it being located right here that there was a previous variance granted for the parking to be in this location that does limit their ability to place that sign and have landscaping there. And here is the other monument sign that they would like. Again, that's about 10 feet from the right-of-way, and it's outside of the site triangle. Here are the two signs, like we kind of talked about in the last two applications ago. We're really not here looking at the design, but rather, what they're asking for, the size and the height meet code requirements. Again, it's the location and the number and the landscaping. So I think covered all of those. Again, one sign per 500 feet. They want two. Has to be 15 feet from the right-of-way. One sign is just under 10. The other is 2.5. However, staff, would argue that this right-of-way doesn't function the same as a lot of our right-of-way because of the limited access of this particular roadway. And again, the last variance is to not have landscaping around the base of the sign. A lot of different criteria here. I know this is in your staff report. I won't go through all of them, but at least the last one on here, whether the sign will be hazardous to traffic or detrimental to public safety. In this particular case, it doesn't appear, even though it's a small setback. And certainly there's a lot of sign variances granted out there. I can't say for certain whether it's been 3 feet, but there's definitely signage out here on roadways because of additional right-of-way takings and expansion of roadways that are probably less than 3 feet. But again, this is a little bit different in the nature of the roadway being a cul-de-sac with only one other user at this point. Staff does not object to the variances. We have confirmed with engineering that the proposed location doesn't interfere with any site triangles. It's at the end of the cul-de-sac. It's really for truck navigation with the shipping area being different than their main building. I think that's the reason why they're asking for it. So with that, Mr. Chair, I turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blackford. Okay, we'll now open it up to public comment. Would the applicant like to comment? Again, if you could state your name, address, and association with the project.
Good evening. My name is Brian Brooks. I am the building project manager responsible for new developments with Rosen USA and looking after the project that is currently underway on the south parcel of property right now, nearing completion at the end of September. My address is 11210 Inter Drive East. That's in Houston, Texas. And I just wanted to maybe elaborate a little bit more on Mr. Blackford's narrative there on the purpose of the sign. So as you may recall, we're currently building this 45,000 square foot inspection tool maintenance facility on the south portion of the land. One of the requirements imposed on us by the Mifflin Township Fire Department was that we had a second address for this building. And so part of that requirement is that we have an address label. Because the building is set back so far from Technology Drive, the only way that we could actually have an address posted on Technology Drive is to have an additional monument sign there. There's no way of really achieving that otherwise. The mature trees up at the front of the lot would obscure having any kind of address signage on the building itself. I also just wanted to elaborate a little bit more on the landscaping. So the site is existing landscaping, is just grass, and so we would propose to put the new signs just within that grass area as shown on the diagram.
Okay, thank you very much. Did not receive any speaker slips, so I will close public comment and open it up to questions from the commission. Starting on my left, Mr. Chapaka.
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chapaka. Ms. Polly?
I also don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Polly. Mr. Hicks?
No questions from me.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Mr. Greenberg?
None for me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg. Mr. Siriano?
No questions from me, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siriano. Mr. Tamarkin?
No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Markin. And I also have no questions. So with that, do we have a motion to approve item V-0020-2024?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion for the approval of variance application number V0020-2024.
Thank you, Mr. Packett. Is there a second?
Second, Soriano.
We have a second by Mr. Siriano. Any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would say that the applicant explained the reasoning, and seemed pretty practical, and a little slam dunk. I will be in favor of it.
Thank you.
I'm also in favor of the motion, given the signage doesn't impact the vision triangle as well as some of the other functional applications that are being imposed upon the site.
Okay, thank you.
No comments.
Okay. Seeing no comments, I will call the roll, please.
Chapaka.
Yes.
Suriano.
Yes.
Pollyea.
Yes.
Tamarkin.
Yes.
Greenberg.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Mako.
Yes. Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, our final sets of applications is from One Church. We have 3 separate items, and I will read all 3 of those into the record. So first, we have a variance application, V-0021-2024. To consider as a variance application, the various sections 1163.01A, parking space size, 1163.03A, width of drive, and 1163.08G, interior landscape requirements of the codified ordinances of the City of Gahanna for property located at 817 North Hamilton Road, parcel ID 025-001918, current zoning RID, restricted institutional district, One Church, David Domain applicant. Then we have a final development plan, FDP-0007-2024, to consider a final development plan for property located at 817 North Hamilton Road, parcel ID 025-001918, current zoning RID, restricted institutional district, One Church, David Domain applicant. And then finally, design review, DR-0011-2024, to consider a design review application for site plan, landscaping, building design, and demolition of property located at 817 North Hamilton Road, parcel ID 025-001918, current zoning RID, restricted institutional district, One Church, David Domain applicant. And I will turn it over to Mr. Blackford for a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for doing all the heavy lifting by reading those 3 applications into the record. Because there's 3 applications, that would be an indication that this was filed under our previous zoning code rules in that. And as such, on our screen right there, outlined in purple is the One Church property. This should be another property that looks familiar to Planning Commission. They've been here a couple of times here in the last several months. One was for a temporary gravel parking lot in this general location of the site, out here in front. And then there were also some improvements to one of the accessory buildings. So the site is zoned RID, Restricted Institutional District. On the 3 sides of the property, that's not Hamilton Road, so on the north, south, and west, on where we see, whether it's in red, which is MFRD, multifamily restricted district. Green here is SF2. The brown is also, it's a planned residential district, and again, SF2. So on all three sides of this property, the site is adjacent to residential development. So 3 applications, what are they requesting? Well, one church would like to do a parking lot expansion and then 22,000 square foot building addition. We'll look at a site plan here, I think on the next slide, that'll show the location of those. The addition is on the front of the building, the east side of the existing building, so that would be in the location facing Hamilton Road. There's 3 primary colors, white, gray, and chestnut siding. They are adding an additional 341 parking spaces for a total of 885. Going by what the zoning code would require based on the various levels of uses and the size of those uses on site. Not that zoning codes are always great at saying what the minimum parking requirements are, but the minimum parking requirements are 550 spaces. So they could add 6 additional spaces and meet the zoning code requirements, but they're going for another 335. There is a substantial amount of landscaping required with the parking lot of this size and with the amount of impervious that they're adding. They are meeting those requirements. They are having about 16,000 square feet of landscaping area. 14,000 is required. They're providing 148 trees when 145 are required. Anytime you're doing any type of development, there are going to be trees that come down. That does not affect their requirement to plant. It's the amount of parking and the overall amount of impervious, but they are removing 187 trees. As promised, here is the site plan. They have a great site plan here to show what's going on up on the screen here. And as we were just talking about, the 22,000 square foot addition, that is in this location right here. So this would be on the eastern part of the property and what would be, for buildings at least, most visible along Hamilton Road. Here in yellow, this is a new parking area. This is in the same general location as a temporary gravel lot. I think it's just a little bit larger. This area down here in yellow, there's some new parking, but also there's a new parking aisle. And here in yellow, probably one of the largest changes here. This is where the majority of those new parking spaces are going. This site in this general location is where their existing retention pond is located. So they're moving the retention pond to the south side of the site. There was also a parking lot in this area, quite a bit smaller than the proposed parking lot, but still not a small parking lot. So basically the retention pond and the parking lot are flipping from their current location. The parking is substantially larger. This area in this part of the site plan, largely, for the most part, unchanged from what's existing. Here's showing some of the landscaping, diving in just a little bit more detail. Again, 148 trees are required to be planted in the parking lot. They do have a few variances, probably at least in staff's opinion, the most substantial one is the request to locate those trees outside of the parking area. About 2/3 of those trees, the applicant is requesting to plant elsewhere on the property, not in the parking lot. I think if we look at this site plan, one thing that struck me when I looked at this in more detail today in preparation for this meeting is you see these very large areas of all gray, no tree islands whatsoever. Very reminiscent from a planner standpoint of shopping centers in like the 70s area where they're just giant heat islands and really an eyesore. Here are the auditorium elevations. One up top here, east from Hamilton Road. So this would be the view that you see as you're on Hamilton Road. This would be the view from the south. So the south side would be abutting. There's some trees. I don't know if all of them are coming down, but that would be along adjacent to some single-family residential areas, not really visible from the roadway. The north elevation, this is also a very visible elevation. This is what folks would see if you're in the Castle Pines neighborhood. It's also, if you're, north on Hamilton Road, you can see the building as well, very visible. And this would be the west elevation. Here's a rendering here. I think it's a little bit of a dated rendering. The view would be, we'd be in the northeast corner of the property. So this would be Hamilton Road. This would be Castle Pines in this area. This gives you a view, again, of what those improvements would kind of look like, a little bit more of a bird's eye view. This is the addition. This is the parking lot. Now, I will say that I'm thinking this rendering is a little old because it appears to show some architectural elements here that are not on the other site plan or the other thing that we just looked at. It also has an access road right here, but that did not meet code, so that is not part of this request. You can see the general location of the retention pond and those new, again, the majority of the 341 parking spaces. Again, it also does a nice job of showing, kind of what's around there. And again, it's adjacent to the residential development on 3 of the 4 sides. So the criteria, 3 different applications. It's in your staff reports. I'll go over them briefly. A design review request. So again, this is under the old code, so there's different criteria than if it was filed under today's code. What are those criteria? Well, it says that when Planning Commission evaluates a design review, should be looking at compatibility of the improvements with existing structures. Would the request improve the design of the district and the economic vitality of the district? And does it maintain, protect, and enhance the physical surroundings? There are some standards that RID zone properties, design standards, not like today's code where we say how many colors can be on a facade or how much glazing and things like that. It's a little bit more subjective and general in nature. Entrances and exits into and from the site shall be decorated and landscaped. Parking in commercial areas, and for this point, this would be considered a commercial area, shall add visual interest and enhance the development. Small individual parking areas are preferred over large parking areas. Landscape islands shall be in the center and the perimeter of the parking areas. And again, I think the second and the fourth one there is why staff has some objections to the one variance. And then earth mounting and trees should be considered to reduce noise. I will say under the previous code that an institutional use such as this, adjacent to residential, does not require any perimeter buffering or screening. That was one of the things that we corrected with the new code. So under the old code, they don't have to have that perimeter buffering and screening. One of the reasons why I think staff is maybe a little bit more adamant than in some cases about the importance of having landscaping in the parking area. Final development plan. The criteria, does the plan meet applicable development standards? It does, with the exception of 3 variances. I talked about 1, I'll cover the other 2 here momentarily. Is it in accord with appropriate plans for the area? Would it have undesirable effects on the area? Is it consistent with the land use character and development of the area? That's the fun stuff you guys get to consider. Staff does recommend approval of the design review and final development plan. The site's a church. It's been used that way for decades. For the most part, the variances, at least 2 out of the 3, are minor in nature. We don't see the ones that we typically see related to setbacks or perimeter buffering kind of issues. So again, staff does support this request. Moving on to the variance applications, there's 3 different variances. The first is to the minimum size for parking. Again, the previous code, based on your drive aisle width, 20 and 10 is what's required. They're asking for 19 and 9. That 19 feet by 9 feet, that is the new standard in our code. So staff supports that so much that we changed the code to have that be our standard. The second one is that your access drive can be 35 feet. There is 36 feet. So again, a 1 foot, pretty minor deviation. In fact, under the new code, we could approve that administratively. So the first 2 would either be administratively approvable or would meet code. The third one is that interior landscaping requirement. Again, about 2/3 of the trees, I think it's like 148 or so that are required. 103 are planted elsewhere, not in the parking lot around the perimeter and such. Variance criteria, a little bit different than what I read previously. Again, different code, different variance criteria. Are there special circumstances or conditions applying to the land, building, or use? Granting of the variance, is it necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of property rights? And would the granting of the application be detrimental to the public welfare? So staff would recommend approval of 2 of the 3 variances. Recommend approval to the reduced parking size and the slightly larger access drive width. Staff would recommend disapproval of the parking variance for the variance to not plant within the parking area. Again, Maddie did a nice job here of explaining why trees in parking lots are a good idea. They're there for a reason. There is data that proves that they do mitigate some of the negative effects associated with drainage and heat islands. Also, they provide shade, and really it's an attractiveness is another component to that. So again, we would be not in favor of that particular request. Also, I know it's on a couple of the exhibits. Maybe it shows up a little bit. On this one right here, and I think what this shows is in orange. I think this represents painted islands, so they're not landscape islands, but just painted on there. So it does appear that there is some room to plant additional trees and have real landscape islands and not painted ones. So again, staff would recommend that that particular variance not be approved. And with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blackford. We'll now open public comment. Would the applicant like to comment? Again, if you could state your name, address, and association with the project for the record.
Yeah, thanks. I'm David Dominy. I'm the expansion director at One Church. I live at 128 Academy Woods Drive, also in Gahanna, about a half a mile from the property. So, yeah, excellent job presenting that, Michael. I appreciate the excellent work the staff does in preparing the summary. It makes our job easy in terms of communication. We don't have any problem with their disapproval. I would like to state that our purpose in putting more trees around the perimeter was to, in fact, provide more screening to our neighbors. We understand our neighbors are concerned about noise and security and appearance, so we wanted to focus our efforts on putting those trees around the perimeter. So we're more than happy to work out how to do that. I will also just state again that we feel a sense of urgency to move through the process, and we're just working very hard to serve those people who want to attend. And there's a pent-up demand to attend services. We're in overflow now, and we feel like we're a little bit behind. So whatever we do in terms of a conditional approval, I just want to make sure we can sort of expedite that process if it's possible. We're more than willing to work through it. Adding islands, our purpose is to, provide as much screening as we can afford and make that as pleasant for our neighbors as we possibly can. I'm prepared to answer questions. I know our neighbors probably have some comments as well, so I'd like to make sure they have ample time and then I can answer those questions. I've also invited Jim Finley from Watcon Verdantis, who's our civil engineer. Dan Magley with G2 is our landscape architect, and Tony Torres is our principal architect for the entire process. He's with Visioneering Studios. So
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so we will now open it up for public. So we received a number of speaker slips, so I'm just going to read these off in the order that I got them. When I read your name, if you could come up and again state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes for comment. So we will begin with Brent Allen.
That is me, Brent Allen. I live at 561 East Johnstown Road. My wife and I moved here from Fort Wayne, Indiana. We bought our house about 2 years ago, and the neighbor invited us to One Church. So we were really excited to go to One Church. We heard such good things about it from other people in the area. And in full disclosure, we continued to go to One Church, and I took a job there. I just want to let you know that my commitment to our neighbors has been to do everything that we can, along with our staff, to help them and to answer questions for them. Joe Listini, that lives at Castle Pines, Pete Ferguson, that lives at Castle Pines, have my phone number. They call me whenever they're concerned about anything. Also, Christy Nelson is somebody that I met here at one of the Planning Commission meetings. I've offered to talk to her about any of the concerns that she has. And again, I want you to know that in moving to Gahanna, One Church was actually one of the reasons that we decided to come to buy our home, and one of the reasons we're glad to be here. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Next speaker slip I have is Charlene King.
Hi. Hi. I'm Charlene King. I reside at 305 East Chester Court, adjacent to One Church, directly behind the pond. As you think about approving or disapproving these plans, I hope you will disapprove them today, keeping in mind this property is surrounded by residential homes. When the church purchased it, they knew that they were surrounded by homes, and we also purchased thinking that they were going to make good neighbors. But that has not been the case. We've had nothing but noise, light pollution, and they've been largely unresponsive to working with us on mutually beneficial agreement for this plans. I'm concerned about a parking lot and backing right up to my fence and pool. Removing a pond of this size and replacing it with asphalt could cause future drainage issues that could affect my property, as well as the foundation of our in-ground pool and the livelihood of our few trees on our tree line. This will undoubtedly have an undesirable effect on the property. As you can see in these photos taken from my backyard and family room, the light pollution, it's kind of a glary picture, but the light pollution is terrible, and that's over an acre away. Imagine that being right up against the fence, even closer, and there's going to be even more lights. And then they're also going to remove a lot of the trees. So as you can also see, the top picture is from my family room. Our house sits very high, at a much higher elevation than the church's grounds. So their landscaping plans will not provide any screening for my home. So if you do approve their plans, I'm asking for a minimum of earth mounds with mature trees, at least 6 to 9 feet tall, evergreen trees staggered. I have 146 feet back there, and they're planning to rip out the fence that they own and not replace it. I do have a pool, so obviously I have to have a fence. So I should not have to incur the costs of their expansion plans. And if the trees that they're planning on planting are anything like they did at Castle Pines, we're in trouble, because if those are even 5 years old, they do not have sufficient screening over there. And the Castle Pines people brought it to their attention in February, and they didn't even do anything to correct it. So I don't know if One Church has explored other options, such as offering possibly Saturday evening services like most growing churches do, that could help alleviate the congestion and the traffic and the safety issues that everyone has on Hamilton Road on Sundays. And then also, they also have a lot of green space they could use for parking without removing the pond or removing the tree lines. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, next speaker slip, Josh Weiner.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Josh Weiner, and I live at 313 East Chester Court in one of the properties immediately adjacent to the pond on the northwest corner of One Church's property. And I'd like to speak about my significant concerns about the impact that the church's expansion plans will have on the well-being of my family and on our community of neighbors. To be clear, I'm not opposed to the church's desire to expand its facilities and operations, and I do appreciate the many contributions that the church makes to our community. However, I believe that the plans they've developed would accomplish the church's expansion goal in a way that is severely detrimental to its neighboring properties and does not meet the review criteria to, quote, not have undesirable effects on the surrounding area. Church officials have told us in meetings that moving the existing pond was the least expensive way to accomplish their parking goals. However, replacing the pond with a parking lot would have significant impacts on those of us that live adjacent to the pond and could impose new costs and burdens on us. I have 2 young children, and I'm very concerned from a safety and security standpoint about having a massive parking lot right up against our property with no barrier separating us except for a few newly planted trees that will take years to grow. We've expressed these concerns about the lack of a separation barrier in meetings with church officials, but despite being told on multiple occasions that they would follow up with us about this concern, they have not yet gotten back to us about it. I also have significant concerns that the removal of the pond will result in increased flooding and drainage issues on my property. The pond predates the construction of the homes in our neighborhood and the adjacent Castle Pines community, and much of the runoff from these properties flows into the pond. If the pond's removed, I worry about the ability of the church's proposed new drainage system to ensure that our property and those of our neighbors do not experience increased flooding issues. In light of these and other concerns, I encourage the Commission to reject the church's application and to direct the church to come up with a new parking proposal that would not require the existing pond to be removed. However, if the Commission does choose to approve the church's application, I request that you add stipulations to at least require the church to do 3 things. First, to remove the proposed northernmost row of new parking on the northwest corner of the lot to increase the distance between the edge of the parking lot and our neighboring properties. Second, to install a fence or some other sort of formal separation barrier between the new parking lot and the adjacent residential properties. And third, to plant more trees along the edge of the property to improve the visual screening between the neighboring homes and the new parking lot. Such steps may increase costs or lower the number of new parking spots a bit, but they would also go a long way towards coming up with a solution that balances the expansion goals of the church with the needs and the rights of the residents who will experience the effects of this project 24 hours a day, 7 days a week going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker forum, Tom King.
Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Tom King. I reside at 305 Eastchester Court. As you guys come to make your decision today, I just ask that you think about how this is going to affect us. As both my neighbor's wife and neighbor have already mentioned, we're concerned with how close the parking lot is to our house. I propose, if you do approve this, like Josh already stated, please remove that first row of parking. It's only 36 spaces out of the 341 that they want to add. That's 10%. That's not a big ask. Secondly, my concern is with the elevation, if you do approve it as is, I find it hard for them to believe to be able to drain the water on their property, to keep it on their property, and also the water that drains off our property not to stay pooled on the bottom. If they're going to create a swell to do that, I believe that's tough to do with 20 foot, along with providing the trees to block the screening. If they do that within that 20 feet, more likely those trees will be planted at the bottom of the swell, which is way below their parking lot. Because I suspect with the elevations that are currently there with the pond, that's going to have to get built up quite a bit. And that's it. Everyone else has already stated what I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, David Hines.
Thank you. My name's David Haynes. I live at 285 Eastchester Court. Several of the speakers have already addressed some of the concerns I have, which concern the removal of existing mature trees, replacing them with much smaller immature trees, and the screening won't be appropriate to block this huge parking lot that we're going to have to live with adjacent to our property. I feel that will really adversely affect our property values and just the desirability of our enjoyment of our backyards. In addition to that, I am concerned about the drainage as well, just the way everything drains today. I don't see that this plan will address that, and I'm afraid that it will cause flooding and other problems down the line. So I am in support of removing at least the first row on the northern edge of the parking area, as well as increase the plantings to provide screening, whether that's through mounding, additional evergreens to provide year-round screening. Anything of that sort would be more acceptable than what they have today. Also, removing the pond that is existing, there's a lot of wildlife that uses that, migratory birds nest there, things like that. So that's a concern just from an environmental standpoint that I have, that it's more than just a retention pond today. It actually is a habitat for, there's a lot of diverse wildlife that lives there and uses that space today. So those are my main concerns, and I appreciate the time.
Okay, thank you very much. Next speaker forum I have, Pete Ferguson.
Hi, I'm Pete Ferguson. I live at 386 Castle Pines Drive. I've lived in Gahanna since 1959, so I've been around here for a few years, probably a lot longer than many of you have. I've watched Gahanna grow, and I've watched it get bigger, and it's been a great place to raise my child, my grandchildren, the whole thing. It's a really nice place. I presented a couple of pictures I would like for you to take a look at as we go through this. I'd like to thank the Planning Commission for allowing me to speak. I am president at Castle Pines Condominiums. I have before you talk about the privacy fence that we have requested to be erected at the north and a little bit on the west edge of their new blacktop driveway. And it is in dark black line that you can see up there. The existing fence that they have is in kind of a black and white line that runs basically east to west. There's a short section going north and a longer section going back toward the east toward Hamilton Road. We would like for them to erect that as soon as possible, or at least be part of this proposal. This request has been discussed more than once. In approximately May 24th of 2017, think about that, when we met with the representative of one church, he stated as fact that the fence would not be a problem. Later in the meeting, in June 14th of 2023, we requested again a fence be requested. Again, a representative said not building a fence right now was preferred, advocating for shrubs, trees, even asking us to help put the fence up if we wanted it. Right now, the trees that they have planted are 4 to 6 inch diameter, nice trees, dogwoods and redbuds. They'll be beautiful trees, and approximately 4 to 5 inch arborvitae. That is not enough, and is not even close to being enough to cover the property spots. You can look at the pictures that we have there to show the situation there. There is a code requirement for screening right now, which is out. It requires 80% opaqueness or more all season long, not just part of the time. We would like to see the fence that we are proposing be built to help alleviate the problems of looking into our property 24/7, 365 as they drive in and park their cars in the north lot. The aerial photo that shows you where the fence was the first one that was up there. This fence discussion has been going on since 2017. That makes it 7 long years with us. We are still waiting. Please help us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker forum, Christy Nelson.
My name is Christy Nelson. I live at 406 Castle Pines Drive. Some years back, the Castle Pines Condominium Board of Managers received ongoing complaints from our residents regarding the level of sound coming from one church. The primary problem seemed to be hesitancy on part of the church to turn the sound down that was coming from the auditorium and to not turn off the outside speakers that were putting sound out to the parking lot and the surrounding neighborhood. Eventually, the sound levels did come down and became less of a problem. However, this took approximately 15 months of ongoing dialogue with the church and disagreements with the church. And after the association turned to law enforcement for assistance. About 4 months ago, plans were approved by the Planning Commission for one church to construct a stage at the west end of the property. It is our understanding that there are plans to wire that stage for sound. During the May 8th meeting of the Planning Commission in 2024, in response to sound concerns, the church representatives indicated that no formal control over the sound was being planned for that area, but they would be open to creating something. And this is documented in the minutes of the meeting of the May 8th. So due to difficulties in resolving sound issues in the past, I have 3 questions. One, have sound measures for the west end elevated stage been created as indicated in the May 8th minutes? The second is, does the new expansion proposal include outside speakers? Meaning, will voice and music from church services and activities be projected outside to the outside parking lot and the neighborhood? And the third one is, what measures are being taken to ensure that any sound that is generated within the new and renovated buildings being proposed will be contained within those buildings? So we are requesting that the plans today not be approved, or you consider not approving them until reasonable solutions for sound control and are in place and documented for that outdoor elevated stage at the west end of the property that's currently under construction right now, and the new and renovated structures that are being proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker form, Valerie Hoffman.
My name is Valerie Hoffman. I live at 295 East Chester Court in Gahanna. Let me preface this by saying that I believe One Church is doing some amazing things for the Gahanna community and our surrounding suburbs. As an elementary school teacher in the district, I've had students share that they go to One Church on Sundays, and even had one little girl come into my classroom a couple of years ago excitedly share that she'd been baptized there. I love hearing about my students and their families finding a wonderful home at One Church, and I truly hope that continues. But with all the good things One Church is doing, I still can't shake some of the concerns that continue to keep me up at night as a mom with a backyard that connects to the proposed new parking lot. When One Church hosted our first neighbor meeting several months back, I expressed concerns about having an unattended parking lot 6 days out of the week right in my backyard. I worried about the safety of my 4 children and my neighbor's children, as it was disconcerting to think of strangers having unlimited access to a huge vacant parking lot a few dozen feet from where my children play. One Church seemed receptive to my concerns and the idea of having a locked gate during the week so that cars wouldn't be able to drive back there at all hours of the night. I was appreciative of their support and thought we were on the same page. However, upon seeing the recent plans that are up on the screen, I was surprised to see the dumpsters, which may not seem like a lot, but I quickly realized that if the back lot was gated like we talked about, the trash collectors would have no way to get out except to basically back the entire length of the building, which seems ridiculous and not very likely. I'm not sure why the dumpsters are being placed there, and maybe it was just an oversight. Perhaps there's a plan for someone from One Church to come over on trash days to lock the gates behind the trash truck each week, and I'm getting upset about nothing. But after seeing how One Church handled the expansion near Castle Pines, I'm scared that it'll be yet another instance of them not doing what they said they would do. Additionally, I don't understand why the new parking lot has to be so big and get so close to houses. Yes, I understand that it's their property, but again, upon looking at the plans, I counted 36 parking spaces right next to mine and my neighbor's backyard fences. It upsets me to think about my 5-year-old playing in his backyard 20 feet away from where strangers will be able to park at all hours. That's simply too close. And dozens of mature trees and greenery, which are already a perfect barrier, are planned to be removed for 36 parking spaces. The number sounds so small, yet those 36 parking spaces will drastically change the quality of life for my family. One Church has said they will create a new barrier, but I continue to have little faith after seeing how the Castle Pines residents were treated. Therefore, I'm pleading with the Planning Commission to deny the 36 parking spaces at least. so that my family can have a barrier. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker forum, Bob Genton.
Thank you. I'm Bob Genton. I'm a resident in Castle Pines. I live at 381 Castle Pines. My comments will be brief as they merely summarize what the two other speakers from Castle Pines have stated. And I too request for rejection of this variance, again, to resolve the unresolved issues yet dealing with the landscaping that has been mentioned by Pete Ferguson, as well as the effect of sound from the stage, as mentioned by Christy Nelson, and perhaps the sound coming from the new auditorium, especially with respect to outside sound, i.e. sound into the parking lot. I also would like to add one more concern too, and that is the traffic that is on Hamilton Road. Makes it very difficult for us as residents to get in and out of our development. And with the increased parking spaces available there, that will only, in my opinion, exasperate the situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Lawrence Spiro.
Hi, I'm Lauren Spiro, and I live at 313 East Chester Court. My property is adjacent to one church behind the existing pond that they propose turning into a parking lot. I respectfully disagree with the city staff that the review criteria for the final development plan has been met. Specifically, criteria 3 states the proposed development would not have undesirable effects on the surrounding area. I feel strongly this project will have very undesirable effects on myself, my family, and my neighborhood. Therefore, I encourage the Planning Commission to disapprove the plans for One Church's expansion project. This project includes adding 341 parking places to One Church's property for a total of 885 parking spots. To build this parking lot, the church will remove a natural barrier of mature trees and underbrush between our properties, as well as a fence along part of our property line. A pond and associated green space will also be destroyed, and all that land will be paved, so it can be used for a few hours once a week. Just think about that. I understand parking and traffic flow is an issue at One Church on Sundays, and I also believe there are solutions to this challenge that do not necessitate, to quote Joni Mitchell, paving paradise to put up a parking lot. I also question the need for 885 parking places. When I asked church staff who will be filling the new parking lot, the data cited was largely anecdotal. Commenters on social media and live streamers who expressed interest in attending services in person. This makes me nervous that this proposed development is built on perceived need and hopes and dreams. I do see on page 5 of the staff report that it states the applicant has demonstrated a need for increased parking. And so I'm a little curious how this was demonstrated and what data One Church presented to support the need for 341 additional parking places when code only requires 550. Finally, I want to acknowledge that One Church often shares about the community they're building and the people that they're helping through their ministry, and I, like my neighbors, really do appreciate that. I want to be clear that I do respect this work. However, I also want you to understand that I'm trying to build a community on the other side of that proposed monstrosity of a parking lot. My neighbors and I are raising kids. We're supporting the local economy. We're educating Gahanna's youth. We're volunteering in this community. And we're doing those things 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, not for a few hours on Sunday. So as you cast your vote, please, I beg you, disapprove of these development plans in favor of the community that sits on the other side of that parking lot and the undesirable effects that it will have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the last speaker form I have is for Brian Hoffman.
Good evening, Chair. My name is Brian Hoffman. I live at 295 East Chester Court, and I get to go last. Where I live up here is right behind the northwest parking lots, and I think what I'd like to do is kind of summarize points that my neighbors have made and made quite well and even better than the prepared comments that I am not pulling out of my pocket. What I'm going to request specifically at minimum is that you take that northern row of parking, which is 36 spaces from the west lots, and you remove it. I would like to see a barrier increase between my backyard, my neighbor's backyard, and where the parking lot will begin. I don't think it's going to have a proven detrimental effect on the church's ability to grow and to serve. And I think by having that there and by being able to use the vegetation there generously, that we're going to get a much better screen and probably the best possible outcome that we can as neighbors and that the church can have for its continued growth. That concludes my comments. Thank you all.
Thank you. So that concludes the speaker forms that we received. For the record, I believe that we received, was it 2 or 3 online comments?
We've received 3 emails.
3. Okay, so I just want to state that for the record. So with the public comment, I'll turn it back over to the applicant if you would like to have a rebuttal for 10 minutes.
I just want to thank my neighbors. That was a terrific presentation and lots of details, and it's a challenging expansion, and we identify that. There were a number of issues that were brought up. I have many of these comments. We've had several conversations with our neighbors. I would like to defend ourselves a little bit. We feel like we've really tried to reach out to our neighbors and work with them, and I feel like we were a little bit unfairly characterized on, not being willing to cooperate. That's absolutely not true. We do have specific challenges in a church that's expanding and growing at this rate. We have a lot of volunteers that serve, and so, changing even sound levels when they're run by volunteers, in a Sunday morning could easily be difficult to control. It's not that we didn't try and try many things, and we have improved over time. So I think it's important to just say that out loud. I will try to, I'm not sure if I can, I want to forward to a slide, Michael. Can you do that, or Sophia? I've got that slide that just has a word that's summarized. Next slide.
You should be able to click now.
Oh, thank you. So this slide kind of summarizes, I think, most of the complaints, but there were a few that were, I think, emphasized tonight that I want to have time to address as well. The first sort of group of them is kind of lumped together in terms of our screening and mitigation, and I put, appearance, noise, light, and security concerns kind of together in that category. And what we've done in our plans is we have maximized our setbacks. The setbacks to the north, we added 5 feet to the minimum setback to create some more space. We also are not doing any development for the first 10 feet. So we're really trying to save as many trees as possible in that. We did maximize the perimeter trees, as I stated earlier, really in the spirit of screening and providing screening that's enjoyable to both us and the neighbors. That's fully our intent, to create an enjoyable experience in their backyards and yet provide screening for the parking lot. It is an improved landscape design. We've employed an architect to actually create pleasant trees and pleasant tree groupings that will have a different appearance and, I think, improved appearance because it's actually planned. The existing tree line is natural and volunteers and undergrowth and is not planned. We do obey the noise ordinances. We work hard for that. And we are replacing the existing fences. We met with our neighbors several months ago, and we do have a fence that I was actually unaware of that goes to the north side of our pond. We had replaced the rest of the fence around the pond, and we could have easily replaced that had we known, but we didn't know, and I didn't notice that needs to be replaced too. Certainly we'll replace that as well. The next, several comments about drainage, and I'll call on Jim Finley to really speak to how the lot is designed and what we've really done to improve how that site works. That site is designed to drain towards that corner. It's actually naturally, the topography of that site drains to that corner. So we're just allowing gravity to do what it wants to do. The original pond was put in there in the 50s for recreational purposes. It's only ever served as a pond, as a stormwater retention pond. It's never had another purpose in its life. It is not a jurisdictional feature according to the U.S. Corps of Engineers. So it is, of course, wildlife is wildlife. It will find a home, but it is not an official wetlands or an environment that needs to be officially protected for that reason. And Jim can speak to the perimeter swale as well. We've had multiple engineers reviewing it, not just ours, but also the city. We submitted these plans to the city back in June. They've been evaluating, they've given us comments. We're in the process of reviewing that. The technical capability of that pond to manage water, or that site to manage water, is thoroughly documented and thoroughly investigated. The next is the wetlands and the wildlife. In fact, there is wetlands on the property to the west, and we've had to mitigate that wetlands. It was officially classified as wetlands, about 0.2 of an acre, and it's being replaced by higher quality wetlands. Even in the report that we received that classified it as a wetlands, went further to say it's not a very good one. It doesn't do a good job of what wetlands are supposed to do. As I said earlier, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers have classified the pond as non-jurisdictional, and we also have confirmed further that there's no endangered bats, in case we can expedite the process and start removing trees. So some of the things that I think the neighbors emphasized tonight more was the light pollution. And one thing that what we're doing programmatically is we're going to minimize the use of that lot at nighttime. There's only, we think, 6 or 7 times a year that we have services that require the use of that lot at night. So we can do a better job with not only, limiting the use of that, but also creating better controls over those lights. Our current lights are just kind of on or off, and the new lights will have better controls so that we can actually adjust the level of those lights so that they won't have the light pollution that they've got now. The lights now, again, they're just on or off, and they are bright and they're high. So we can correct that. The other was noise from the new stage. The new stage has already been approved in this body. We are delaying the installation of the speakers until we figure out programming. What I said in the previous meeting was not that we were unwilling, but what I said was it's technically very difficult to mitigate noise when you're that close. We are very close to the neighbors. What I said, it was going to be a problem that we have to manage and control, as opposed to mitigation. To imagine a physical barrier that would dampen any noise at that distance seems like a very difficult challenge. So that was all. The other thing was brought up several times was the parking quantity, why we need that. We've done several detailed counts of people attending and parking, and we've done it 4 or 5 times years over the last 5 years, and it always comes back at about 1.8 per car. So our parking spaces, even those last 31 that they're asking us to remove, the design that we planned is almost perfectly balanced with the number of seats that we're building. So it really is a well-balanced site for those 3 services on Sunday morning that are getting the most attendance. So I'm not sure the protocol here. Can I ask Jim to speak to the design, or he just has the 2 minutes?
Well, again, you have 10 minutes for rebuttal, so if you want Mr. Finley to come speak.
Yeah.
I'm Jim Finley with Watcon Verdantis. We're the civil engineers for the One Church site. And a lot of people mentioned about flooding problems. Well, we're taking all the drainage that comes from the north out of Castle Pines. We're going to pipe it across the parking lot and through the new basin. It currently goes into the existing pond, correct. And then along the north side, right about in the middle of the parking lot, we've added a structure there to capture any drainage coming from the lots there in the cul-de-sac. And then further on to the west, we started a swale, and we've taken a swale all the way around the outside perimeter of the site in order to take any off-site drainage and to bring it on-site and then convey it down through the dry basin that is in the existing park just south of the pond there. Does that, anyone have any questions?
There was one more comment about the noise we're conveying from the auditorium, and I'd like to ask Tony to speak to that, about what we're doing for the building design to minimize the noise that's transmitted from the building.
Tony Torres, I'm the project architect. So one thing that you'll notice is that the auditorium is actually further away from the residences on the west and the north side. The church has employed an AVL consultant, an acoustic consultant, to handle the noise that's within the worship auditorium itself. So there's a lot of acoustic materials and sound traps that are supposed to capture the sound inside the building and keep it from going outside the building. There's no proposed speakers on the outside of the building to put sound into the parking lot. Everything is going to be contained within the building itself.
I think that concludes our answers. I'll stay up here for more. Good timing. Should I just stay up here for any more? Okay.
If you could have a seat, we've received one more
Okay.
speaker form, so I'm going to recognize the gentleman who had the speaker form and give you some rebuttal time. So I'll recognize Mr. Jay Bonham, and you'll give you 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Jay Bowman. Thank you for receiving my request to speak. I live at 336 Vista Drive. I'd just like to say briefly, I appreciate staff's recommendation to include interior trees to the parking lot. I'd also like to note many of my fellow residents, or a number of my fellow Gahanna residents, talked about the traffic on Hamilton Road, and I wonder if one church might consider, to help mitigate that traffic, adding additional bicycle parking and potentially even a pedestrian connection to the nearby park to the southwest. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Then give the applicant time to do a rebuttal, and again, I'll give you 3 minutes.
That's a great suggestion and a new one. We never thought about adding or improving the walking. It's a pretty difficult topography to go from that park. It's a pretty steep hill that goes up there. Like I said, I live on Academy Woods, and sometimes I'll walk, and if it's rained the night before, you can't even get up the hill. So, and I have an extremely low center of gravity, and I still can't do it. So it's challenging to make that work. We have not considered additional bicycle parking, but we have done a great deal from a traffic point of view. The traffic impact study is currently underway. We submitted an MOU. Everyone agreed with the course of action that we took. There were several correspondences back and forth between us and the city engineers who employed EP Ferris to review that. The traffic study has been completed, and we've submitted it just a couple of weeks ago on the 20th. In addition to that, we've done a lot of work with traffic and site engineers to help really maximize how the parking lot works itself. Because what we can do on the site helps to minimize what happens on Hamilton. And that's really the nature of what we're doing. So, and I'll just say, I know we're almost out of time here. I think, the screening concerns, we are 100% committed to coming up with the best solution for screening. Again, my request is to create a process that somehow can be expedited so that we could create those solutions together and actually make that fair and equitable and make sense for everyone. When we go back to the Castle Pines fence, I remember those conversations well, and it was, we were debating the idea of using landscape material as screening versus a fence. So the nature of that conversation in my mind was exactly that. And what our comment was, my comment was that I prefer landscaping to fences. I think they're more attractive, and they make the property more pleasant for both. We've invested a lot in screening landscaping, a lot. And this new plan has a lot to be spent. So any compromise that we make with adding more privacy fencing, I'd like to be able to navigate that in a way that the church can afford and make a screening solution that makes sense and make a planting that makes sense as well. So that would be my request, that we can still move ahead with the approval process, but have a process to finalize these screening concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Should I stay up here or sit down?
You can have a seat for now. Okay, so that's going to close the public comment portion, and I'm going to open it up for questions from the commission. So starting on my left, Mr. Shapaka.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot to digest. Mr. Blackford, does our variance for the 9 foot by 19, that is currently, since this is the new code, is 9 by 19?
The new code, it is 9 by 19 is our new standard, but this was filed under the old code, so it technically requires a variance, yes, sir.
So the parking spaces that currently exist are 10 by 20?
There's various ages of that parking lot. I don't recall a variance to reduce size. Well, and then depending on the drive aisle, the old code would allow 9 by 19 depending on the drive aisle width. So there's some variables there that I can't really say whether or not,
Is
what's
this application asking for a complete restriping of all the parking lots, or just the new?
No, it's not for everything.
So just the new would be?
I don't know if it's just the new, though. I'm not that familiar with it, but I know the northern parking lot looks to be identical to what it
That'll get us
was.
to, David, I would take that mic and just stay there, man, I can't. So the parking, are you restriping the whole
Yeah, we're
facility?
going to need to. There's enough changing on the lot and the traffic flow that we're going to need to kind of strip it back down again and reseal it and then restripe it.
And then restripe the whole thing?
Yeah, yeah.
So 9 by 19 everywhere?
Yep.
Okay. The fencing, you answered the question on the fencing. I think you can work with the neighbors on that issue. To me, the site drainage is going to be handled by the city engineer. I mean, they're not going to approve anything that's going to be detrimental to the neighbors. I think that's an issue that they can address. The light pollution is currently there now. These are not cut off light fixtures, it just throw the light down.
There.
I mean, it seemed like that we saw an image where it was glowing, that Ohio State was playing there. So is that, how are the light fixtures currently?
The light fixtures that were in that picture were installed, I think, in the 80s. And so they're very high and they're kind of non-directional. They do cast quite a bit of light, and we don't have any controls over on and off, other than on and off.
But they're getting replaced.
They're getting replaced.
And so we'll get the new,
Yes.
our little light.
Yes.
Photometric layout, cut out, so that issue will go away.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Chair, I will just have some comments later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shapaka. Ms. Polly.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My concern is these 36 parking spaces. Can you address why there's no other way to achieve what you need to achieve as far as parking without these particular spaces that will abut directly to these people's properties?
The design that we've created is to balance with the size of the auditorium that we're building so that we could serve the entire community. That's why it was designed. It wasn't particularly designed in a way that would purposely offend our neighbors. That wasn't the point. We were really working, and Jim can attest to this, we developed lots of different solutions to create that amount of parking on that site and still provide enough space for the stormwater retention. So it is a challenging site to do that with. There isn't a lot of flexibility as it would appear there should be. There it really isn't. So there's only a few ways to really lay that out. So that's why it's there. And if we take those spaces away, we would have to redesign the entire lot, maybe move some more spaces down by the pond instead, and try to get the parking to match more with our tenants.
And
So
what would redesigning that lot look like?
We'd have to, and I'm speaking to Jim's job now, but if we made that a drive aisle, that gives us more space to move everything else to the north, which might give us an aisle to the south. Maybe, yeah. They've taught me to be parking engineers.
Okay, thank you. My other question with regard to the Castle Pines, with the fence. You said that you've had numerous conversations with residents, the HOA, and whatnot, and they've indicated that that would be their preference. Is there a reason why you haven't followed through with installing that fence that they'd asked for?
Yeah, I would say that's a little bit of a mischaracterization of how this has gone.
Okay.
We talked about it back in 2017, and they, you know, they asked for the fence, and this is what I remember, and I'm not great with memories and dates, but we had a detailed conversation at that time, and our suggestion was that we would do it with screening trees as opposed to a fence. So now we've invested thousands of dollars in trees. Now to put a fence up too feels like, oh my gosh, we're just spending money to do the same thing again. But I'm happy to go down that path. We
I
have
mean,
not
when-
had
when-
ongoing conversations.
I'm just, if that solution is not effective, which a lot of these
Right,
homeowners have
yeah.
indicated that it's not, would you be willing then to meet with them?
Certainly,
and
yeah.
work out a better
Yeah.
solution for their particular properties?
Yeah, yeah.
And then what about the Eastchester Court? If we do allow the design review plan to be approved with these 36 parking spaces, how are you going to work with them to kind of address their concerns, which, in my opinion, are valid?
I don't know how to navigate that process. We're willing to do that because, again, we feel a sense of urgency to keep moving and to move forward. So I don't know how to navigate that with, I mean, the neighbors tend to agree, so I would maybe request that we appoint a council from the neighborhood that would represent them, and then we would work together and present to the city our solution and make sure that everybody agrees, and then we could move ahead with that. But I'm just making that up on the spot.
And just one more question. When you say sense of urgency, and you've said it a couple times, can you just explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, we're currently seating people in overflow, so we currently have a demand to attend that we can't achieve. So we're having people park off campus. We've tried a number of times to do shuttles. Of course, we're going to have to go back to that once we get under construction. And it's very difficult to get those processes moving with that size of a crowd. So it's just challenging to make that happen. What we really try to do is minimize those barriers that we can minimize so that people could come and experience, what we think we're all about, is getting people to experience that, to have that spiritual experience.
Understood.
So we're just trying to make that happen.
I understand it's a difficult situation. Nobody's going to be happy.
It's a great problem to have. I mean, that a church is growing and healthy and doing good things. It is a great problem to have, but I regret the impact it has on our neighbors. I know it's very difficult,
Understood.
and I don't feel good about it, but, we still.
Thank you.
Yep.
That completes my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Smalley. Mr. Hicks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Dominy, the only question I had was, in your opening comments, you indicated that the interior landscaping requirements part of the variance, you would be open to complying with code. Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah, and what I'd like to do, because what we did is we moved trees from there to the perimeter. So what I don't want to do is just commit church resources to doing both. If we can, manage it, and especially if there's some amount of privacy fencing, if we can manage all that as a holistic solution. What happened with the northeast lot is we had a lot of this. I misunderstood the direction, and so we ended up with a landscape plan that, while dense, is not as pleasant as it could have been. So we ended up really putting a lot of extra material there. So I want to avoid that.
Okay, so to put it another way, if we, the commission, consider each component of the variance separately and we deny that specific one, you then would be required to comply with the code.
Right.
Do you feel you can accomplish that? If we were to split the consideration and approve, or to consider, possibly approve, possibly deny the other components, but specifically to the interior landscape requirements, if that were denied, you would then be required to comply with the code. Can you?
Understood. I understand your question.
Yeah.
I'm a little uncomfortable because I don't know exactly what that means. Can I ask Dan to help us? Can I ask Dan to help us with that? Because he understands the code.
Absolutely.
I
I've been up yet, Dan Magley with G2 Planning. I'm at 441 Charrington Road in Westerville. I will say, so like they said, we have about a third that are already in the islands or peninsulas. And that's, roughly 50, and then 2/3 that would still need to go in. That's roughly another 100, which you could see, putting another 100 trees inside the parking lots would be a lot of islands. And I know, one of the goals of Dave was to provide more perimeter screening to the neighbors, which is what we're trying to accomplish. And one of the reasons they, were not approving or they did not see this variance as necessary was because reducing heat island effect. I will say we do have about, over 50 of the trees extending into the parking lot to help that. Even though they're not in an island or peninsula necessarily, they are on the edges and will be, their canopy will be over the parking lot itself, a lot of them. So, if there was some combination of, not just a third, but working somewhere in the middle of that might be helpful. It would be unfortunate to take all of those 100 trees that we're trying to use as additional buffering and have to move them inside of a peninsula or island. I will say on the buffers, we do have, a solid evergreen row, a staggered row of evergreens that's, 10 to 12 feet on center. These are large evergreens. They're not just arborvitae, they're spruces and firs and pines that get pretty big. But in addition to those, we provided these deciduous trees that, have nice fall color and provide other textures and just make that a nicer scene for the neighbors. So those would probably have to come out of the perimeter if that were to happen.
Sorry, that was a non-specific answer. It was kind of a, we'll figure it out. Is there a way to allow that to happen for us to figure it out and compromise with the?
So from where we sit, it would be, approval with modifications or deny. So, Mr. Chair, when we get to that point, I'm going to recommend that we split out the variance components and consider them separately. And we'll have a discussion at that point.
Okay.
And that's the only question I have.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. Yep.
Okay, Mr. Greenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Dominy, how many cars do you have each week right now?
Counting the off-campus parking
Yeah.
and the variance you just granted us a couple weeks ago, about 600.
So you're going to have 200 extra spaces?
We're going to have 300 extra spaces, 300 and change.
And that will accommodate everybody who's coming on a weekly basis?
Mm-hmm.
So why is there such heartburn about the 33 spaces that the residents want you to eliminate?
Because we're adding more seating. We're having 600 cars right now, and we can only seat 700 and change in our auditorium. So we're in overflow now. So what we've done is match our parking demand and our seating size based on the 1.8 ratio, 1.8 per car. So that's the consternation there. And I'm open to redesigning that and putting the parking on the bottom. I think we just have to work it out.
Okay, my other question is, what the residents brought up tonight, was there anything that was new that you didn't know about?
I think so. I think they did a better job explaining some of the noise complaints, and so I wanted to address those more thoroughly than I had. I think everything
But
is.
you knew they wanted a fence in the back?
We knew they wanted screening, and so I was trying to address the screening the best way I knew how. I wasn't purposefully not listening to them or doing something else. We were trying to achieve it with the landscape screening because we were required to plant those trees. So that we were trying to do it and have a win-win. So,
But it didn't sound that you had a major objection to putting in the privacy fence in the back. Or
I
do
don't.
you?
The only objection would be, managing the number of trees that we need to plant because of the expense. Making a fence that's 300 feet long at, $15 to $20 a foot is a real expense. And if I need to do the fence and the landscape screening, now I've just doubled my budget. So, yeah, sorry.
The requirement would be for the parking lot perimeter screening, it's basically either the evergreen tree row or a fence, I believe. So if the fence were to go up, the evergreen tree row would probably come out.
And be put somewhere else on the property?
No, it's for a parking lot perimeter screening requirement. So it's just something that's 6 foot height and 80% opaque, which a privacy fence would achieve. Right now, we're trying to achieve it with the evergreen trees and give the natural buffer. So it's kind of an either or situation, I believe. Is that?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
I think he's right too, but I'm not sure. So I want to make sure that we don't commit to something we can't achieve. That was all my concern was.
Okay, another question is the drainage plan seemed to be brought up a couple times. Have the engineering plans been shared with the residents at all that have concerns about drainage? You're saying there's going to be off-site drainage coming onto the property, going directly to the drainage pond, right?
Yeah, we did send some of that information, Ryan, right? Did you fill it? Oh, Ryan's not here anymore? Okay. Yeah, we had a meeting with the neighbors and we talked about it, and then I believe we sent them the information afterwards, but I don't want to misrepresent something that happened. Did we send that plan? Oh, okay. Yeah.
So at the last meeting, one of the things I had strongly recommended is that you have regular meetings with your neighbors, because from what I'm hearing, there's a lot of concerns of about a number of different issues, and probably could be easily resolved with a couple of sit-down sessions and talking with them, but the communication seems to be missing here. And I would strongly encourage you to go back and meet with them and address some of these things so that the community has confidence that the church is going to do right by them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Absolutely. Okay. We did a bad job with that. We had one meeting several months ago, and then we had another meeting, with the neighbors to the north, and then we had some follow-up after that meeting, and then we got busy with the other stuff and didn't follow up after that. So,
thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg. Mr. Siriano.
No questions, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Siriano. Mr. Tamarkin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is for Mr. Blackford. The parking islands, their vast majority are being painted. You can kind of see them in this graphic here, which are the orange ones. The orange ones are paint, not concrete with dirt. Is that code? Are you allowed to do a painted island in code, or is the code?
There's no code for or against it, so it's just pavement. Okay. So I imagine if it's really busy, it's going to function like a parking space, and that's probably why, I don't want to speak for the applicant, but I imagine that's why it's just a painted area for landscaping and not a real landscape island.
And that would be my concern, is that when the lot fills up, those become parking spaces. People start parking in the painted islands. But we don't have any code. In the old zoning code, we took out the barrier down the middle, which was silly.
The barrier down the middle, and that's why,
But there's no, the code does not require that that the islands be concrete, landscaped, raised.
Well, they're supposed to be, yes, if they're an actual landscape island. This is, in 20 years of doing this is the first I've seen painted islands, so I'm not familiar with that concept. So I guess it's, again, just more of a striping thing, asking people not to park there. But
something like Stone Ridge has painted islands, they, at the end of their islands, are not raised, landscaped.
I don't recall being there, but again, on newer developments, whether it's here or any other jurisdiction I've ever worked in or ever heard of, landscaping within a parking lot is required. And normally you don't have painted islands because like they're talking about the landscaping requirement. Well, the landscaping requirement's so high because there's so much impervious surface and 300 and plus, parking spaces. So parking lots are supposed to be designed with these end caps that are landscape islands. I mean, that's pretty much how basically every zoning code. You're right, we did away with the middle requirement because that was unusually written and probably not the intent of the code.
But our code does not require the island at the end of the row to be
It
landscaped.
requires, you're correct, it doesn't have to be at the end, but you have to have landscape islands and peninsulas within your parking area. So it's up to the design professionals how to do that. I would say, I think we talked a lot about this 36 parking spaces over here. Ideally, as a planner, if I had more say, I would say it's not good code to have 36 uninterrupted parking spaces. You typically see that in a suburban community. That's why you have requirements for landscaping to break that up, so it's not just a long, paved area.
Okay. And then the next question, as far as the 36 spaces, I do think they could be relocated. The north spaces could be relocated to the south. The south property line is a little smaller. The lot's a little, it's not truly triangular, but there's certainly more space there. But those 36 spots at the north could probably become 25 spots or 30 spots on the south. And that would relieve a lot of neighbors' concern and probably only cost you less than a dozen spots. Then you have the spots on the west side, which is probably another 36 or 40 facing right into people's yards. Yep. Those are probably also a concern. So really the concern is not 36, it's probably 80. You can make each row 2 or 3 spaces longer and eliminate those. So I'd encourage you to take a look at your parking lot design. I'm not an engineer, I'm not an architect, but I spend a lot of time on parking lots.
The west setback is at least 40 feet. We're a lot further away from the
It is,
neighbors.
but you're still going to have, then again, you mentioned you're only going to use that lot at night 6 or 7 times a year, I assume, Christmas, Easter, big events. But you're still, without a fence, you're still going to have those headlights going right into people's yards. You're going to have cars facing in the yards, and we heard a lot of concern about the neighbors about that. So I'll just ask your engineer. Like I said, I'm not an engineer. I'll ask your engineers, take a look at that lot, see if it's ways to redesign the north and the west without losing, I understand your need for parking spaces. Tell me about the fence. If we requested a fence, would you be willing to do a fence on the entire north side and the entire west side?
Yeah, that is about 1,000 feet of fence, just to be clear. That's a big expense for us. So, again, it would be offset by fewer plantings, but that's a really expensive fence. So I would say that if we, let me just ask this question, if we do redesign the parking lot to minimize the number of perimeter spaces, does the need for the fence weigh as heavily anymore? Especially considering that we're not using it at night, but 6 times a year. So it seems like a big expense of 6 figures plus.
And one of my concerns, on the northeast lot, which we approved a couple years ago, I don't think the landscape plan that we approved was the landscape plan that was delivered.
It is now.
Okay.
We were.
I should have driven in there today before the meeting, and I didn't.
We just did.
Okay.
And we tried to rush it, and so we planted trees in the driest August in the last, whatever, it's been very dry, so we're going to lose a few of them and have to replant them. But yeah, we've been working pretty hard on that. Maddie and her team have been super helpful helping us kind of
Because the one
navigate
picture the
that.
gentleman showed us was certainly a very tiny tree looking from the parking lot at a lot of condo.
And I don't know if that would still look the same if you looked at it today. I don't think so, yeah.
I should have visited the lot. I did not today. I usually do. I want to just get clarification on the lights. You're going to replace every parking lot light in the aisle with new, modern lights that'll be, the old parking lot, the new parking lot are all going to have new lighting?
The new parking lot already has new new lighting, because
Okay.
we've developed, except for the first 2 or maybe 4 light poles that are in the existing lot. Those may be existing, the rest have all been replaced,
So,
But so the west lot is all getting brand new, and it's also getting more, better control, so we can control the light level in that back lot. I don't think we want it to be 0 when we're not using it. I think there should be some amount of safety light back there, so it doesn't encourage, even if it's gated, gates are, do better to reduce it, but I don't want to make that an attractive nuisance. So I think I need a minimum amount of light back there just to keep it safe. But nowhere near the amount of light that we run now. So the west lot will get more light controls and new lights, both.
okay. Will the new lot be gated?
Yes. We're going to gate the top there.
So you kind of got to gate it at 2 spots, the top and the bottom?
Well, yeah, we could, but the bottom light is not much of a entrance. It's not very attractive to enter that way, because you got to enter the south entrance, go south, and then go around. But a second gate isn't going to make a difference.
But if I'm a 19-year-old looking for somewhere to drink beer at night, I could get in there.
Yeah, that's true. I wouldn't even need roads when I was 19. I found a way. So, yeah.
To me, if you're going to gate it, you got to gate it. There should, if it's gated, there should be no way in from either direction. Mr. Chair, that's the extent of my questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Markin. So I have a few questions. You might have already answered this, but again, kind of walk me through the thought processes on flipping the parking lot. So currently, parking lot on that southwestern side, you're going to be moving it to the northwest.
Yeah.
And same way with the pond. Again, kind of walk me through the rationale for that.
No, that's brilliant. Honestly, we started the process believing that wasn't going to be, nobody considered it. Moving the pond was literally the last thing that we tried. So we initially started with increasing the size of the of the existing pond to accommodate the additional water that we needed to manage. But most of the additional requirement that we have to manage is south of where the pond is. So we had to add a second retention pond to deal with all the new hardscape that we were adding. So we, in addition to making the north pond bigger, we had to create a second structure. And then by the time you did that, you weren't adding any spaces. So then we experimented with creating a structure as opposed to a natural pond. And that got very expensive because it was 6 retaining walls, basically a swimming pool that you're building to retain that. And then that sort of went into a slippery slope with underground water retention, which got very expensive. And it was only until we really started doing the math on all what that was going to cost that the engineer brought up and said, well, what if we move the pond? And that turned out to be about $400,000 less. So that was how it wasn't our first choice.
Okay, so essentially what you're saying, that this proposed location of the parking on that northwest side, it's really kind of driven by the drainage of the site.
Really is.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. And in that same vein, and this might be kind of wade into some technical things, but could you kind of expand a little bit more upon the sizing of the storm sewers that you're going to be putting in there to handle this this new impervious surface that you're introducing?
Well, we will be adding some, like I said, we're picking up the Castle Pines sewer, storm sewer, and bringing it through the parking lot to the pond. We're also adding a couple other structures, one just north of the pond to catch those off-site flows, and one lower in the pond to pick up, or lower in the parking lot to pick up some of the flows. But primarily that lot will surface drain to the pond.
Okay. And again, I'm assuming that you've run your storm calcs and everything, and
Oh, yes. It's been through one engineering review with the city.
Again, I don't want to assume anything, but I would just hope that that's been done. And safety bench in the pond?
Correct.
Shifting gears a little bit, it was brought up about the dumpster. How is that going to look and how is that going to function? Have you thought through again the circulation, just how that gets cleaned out and when?
Yeah, the trash is picked up once a week, so we would just have to manage the gate, opening the gate for that, for the trash truck to go back there. That's, yes. And we did manage it in such a way that the traffic, that it can actually pick it up. That was part of what Verdantis, brought to the table to make sure that the trash trucks can get access to it and pick it up. But it's collected once a week. We have 2, containers, and yeah, we'll just have to open the gate for the trucks to get back there.
Okay. And going back, and again, not to belabor a point, but the concerns on the parking there on the perimeter on the north and the west. Do you think that there would be adequate space there? Or, again, I'm sure you had to go back there and redesign a little bit around that pond there to the south if we get to that point.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
Well, again, if we were to limit the number of parking there on the north and the west side there, do you think that there's a way to design spaces there around the pond on that southwest side to accommodate?
Around the back of the pond? No, I don't want to. We can't put parking there, can we? It's all retention.
If the estimated number is 80, we're probably going to lose 60 spaces here. So that's where we're at. The pond has to be the size that it is in order to handle all the drainage. We have it right now where it will handle a 100-year storm event with the weir only just barely activating. So it can handle all of the drainage coming from Castle Pines and off of this entire site as it's designed now. We can't lose any capacity with the pond. So.
Okay. All right. And that concludes my questions. Okay. Any other questions from the commission?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Blackford, so the design review application, if I read it, it says site plan, landscaping, and building design. Let's just say that the final development plan does not get approved. Does that affect the design review application?
Yes, sir. Great question. So in my opinion, based off of the discussion tonight, and that I think if there's changes to the request, or if, like you stated, Mr. Shapaka, if the final development plan's denied, then essentially there is no design review request without the final development plan. The variances aren't necessary without the final development plan. If there's a change to the parking lot configuration of 80-plus spaces, that's something. So we talked a little bit about the northeast parking lot, and a couple years ago that went through the process, and I do recall that particular planning commission meeting, and it was a little bit of working with the applicant, trying to come up with solutions to landscaping, and just to be very blunt, that's the only way I know how to be. That did not go very well. It's still something that, it's been a struggle to gain compliance. So I think doing things out of planning commission workshop when there's like at this level or this scale, staff, I wouldn't have a comfort level with approving something and then giving that staff, say that you guys are doing this, but want to take this opportunity to say that if there's going to be changes to parking lot configuration, that's probably something that needs to go back and then come back before planning commission, and really isn't appropriate for a staff level approval given the amount of public involvement and consideration given to this request. Thank you.
Follow-up question?
Yes, sir.
So our requirement for the building that's there and the new building that's being built, 550 spaces are required by whatever calculation that the city has developed per square foot for the building use group. So is there ever a limit on that I mean, can they come back
We,
and double it?
we
if
do
they
not
the
have
land?
parking lot maximums. That's not something that we have in the new code. Somebody may have wanted that. That's very challenging to come up with parking lot maximums just as is minimum. So the way we regulate parking is while there's no maximum, there is limitations on lot coverage, setbacks, landscaping, retention, things of that nature. So that kind of boxed it in a little bit.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Packer. Ms. Polly?
I don't have any further questions.
Mr. Greenberg?
No further questions.
Mr. Triano?
No.
Mr. Tamarkin? Okay, so hearing no further questions, would like to break out the 3 variance requests as separate items. So I'll try and keep this as, excuse me, as straight as possible, I'm sorry. So first, I'd like to have a motion to consider variance application to vary section 1163.01A, parking space size.
Chair, I move to approve variance application V-21-2024, specific to the variance to section 1163.01A, parking space size.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hicks. Do we have a second?
Second to Markin.
Second by Mr. Tamarkin. Any discussion on the motion?
So I just want to have a point of clarification.
Yes.
So this variance is for just the size of the parking spaces, nothing else?
Correct. This is going to be specific to that section of the code.
Thank you.
And the aisle. Right, the aisle width.
The width of the aisle. Okay. Thank you.
No. This is parking space size.
Just parking space size?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, hearing no other discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Hicks,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
Yes.
Suriano,
Abstain?
Polly,
Yes.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Mako,
Yes,
Shapaka.
Yes.
motion passes.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve application V-21-2024, specific to the variance to section 1163.03A, width of drive.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Hicks. Do we have a second?
Second to Markin.
We have a second by Mr. Tamarkin. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Hicks,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
Yes.
Suriano,
Abstain?
Polly,
Yes.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Mako,
Yes,
Shapaka.
Yes.
motion passes.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve item V-21-2024, specific to the variance to section 1163.08G, interior landscaping requirements.
I have a motion by Mr. Hicks. Do I have a second?
Second to Markin.
Second by Mr. Tamarkin. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Shapaka?
I will not be in support of the interior landscaping requirement. I believe that is the root of a lot of the problems that the owner is having with the neighboring committees and people involved. I think that that is a vital thing, and that's going to kick in the final development plan also.
Thank you, Mr. Shapaka. Ms. Polly?
I don't have any comments.
Mr. Greenberg?
Yes. I agree with Mr. Shapaka. I will not be in favor of this variance.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg. Mr. Suriano?
No comments.
Mr. Tamarkin?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some concerns. I will not be in support, but I'd like to see a new and different plan. It was mentioned that if we have to add trees to the parking lot, we're going to remove trees from the barrier. One of the things we hear from the neighbors is we don't like the big, vast parking lot, but I think one of the things we also hear is we don't want less shielding or fewer trees around the perimeter for the parking lot. So I'm not going to be in support of this, but I would like to see at a future meeting the church to come back and give us a presentation, because I'm not sure it's an equal trade-off. I'm not sure we want to trade perimeter trees for parking lot trees. I think we just want to see a little bit better plan, all right? Because the perimeter, if you're not going to do a fence, the perimeter in my mind is more important than the parking lot. So we're kind of curious. I'd like to rethink it, give you a little time to do that, and come back.
Thank you, Mr. Markin. And I'm also not going to be in support of this variance request. I think, given the scale of this this project and what's being asked, that these islands are going to be it's going to be very important to be in compliance with that section of the code. So again, I will not be in support of that. So hearing that, clerk, please call the roll.
Hicks,
No.
Tamarkin,
No.
Suriano,
Abstain?
Pollyea,
No.
Greenberg,
No.
Mako,
No.
Shipaka.
No.
Motion fails.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve item FDP-0007-2024.
We have a motion by Mr. Hicks. Do we have a second?
Second to Markin.
We have a second by Mr. Markin. Any discussion? Mr. Shipaka?
Yes, I will not be in support of the final development plan. I think there's a lot of discussion that still needs to go on. As I look at this, you guys are dealing with pretty much a square peg in a round hole. We have good people on both sides. I can make everybody unhappy. I don't think I can make everybody happy. With the discussion continuing between the owner and the residents, if you want a privacy in your property, you put up a fence. Don't ask your neighbor at the church to put it up for you. So, I mean, some people might be happy with the landscape, some people might want a fence. I would like to see a kind of a commitment or an answer before that comes before us if it fails. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Shipaka. Ms. Polly?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to say that I understand the need for the church the urgency that the church has to accommodate its congregants. I completely understand that. However, I will not be in support either, just due to the fact that there are just too many complaints from both neighbors, both the Castle Pines neighbors and the East Chester Court neighbors. There's just too much. And based on what I'm hearing, it doesn't seem as though most of those complaints have been addressed in a manner that is even workable for them. So I would like to see more done to address those issues and to create a balance so that, obviously not everybody's going to be happy here, but I don't see any kind of a balance created that would support the needs of these neighbors and what they've expressed that they're interested in doing.
Thank you, Ms. Polly.
Sorry, that's all.
Mr. Hicks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As has been stated, there's a lot of things to consider with this application. We heard tonight about site pollution, light pollution, noise pollution, and then stormwater management. And I think that my colleagues did a great job with asking the questions a lot better than I could. We have a situation where neighboring residents have an existing condition that's going to go away if this development plan is approved. Perhaps they bought their house with this existing condition. I'm torn between the right of the property owner to develop their property within code and the neighbors arguing that it's going to create a burden or an unfair condition to them. I'm reminded of applications that came before us that were similar, where the school was involved, Middle School East and the high school. Middle School East, I remember, had some parking lot additions, and the neighbors that were immediately adjacent to that had very similar concerns that we heard tonight. Light pollution, headlights going into their backyard. And then with the high school, when the football field was moved, the neighborhood that was adjacent to where it was moving to had concerns that were similar, or some could argue greater than what was argued tonight. My comments then are the same as they are now, and that is, we can't ask the developer, the property owner to fix, this issue won't be fixed with landscaping or fences. What is there now, if the plan goes forward, was going to go away. And there's nothing that the code says or that we, the commission, can ask them to do to replace it. So it just, like with the high school, like with the middle school, there's no solution that can be put on administratively or with a modification or condition that will replace what is being removed or changed. Again, I definitely agree with my colleagues that the buffering that exists, and I think I heard maybe there's a fence that's being used by for some barrier to a pool, and if that goes away, then they are going to lose that and have some site pollution potentially in their backyard. I disagree with my colleagues with, that I will be in support of the final development plan for this reason. The criteria for approving a final development plan are such that it does not create an undue effect on the neighboring properties. And we had that as one of the slides earlier. And we heard from some residents that they feel that it does create an undesirable effect to their property. However, there's, outside of denying the final development plan, there are no conditions or modifications that we could put on this plan to reasonably impact what is going to be developed on this property. The city is not going to tell the property owner and the neighbors what to do. I know there was a suggestion on maybe there's a council that could be created and there's a city representative. That's not reasonable. That's not going to work. The city's not going to be a part of that, and the planning commission is not going to be a part of that. That's not their job. That's not our job. So all we can do is rely on the property owner's representation that they will continue to work with their neighbors. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to agree. Again, with what was mentioned earlier, there are going to be disagreements between fences and trees, and so I will be in support of the final development plan for those reasons, because I do feel that the criteria for approving a final development plan from the Planning Commission are met. And those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Mr. Greenberg.
I got to follow that. Sorry. Mr. Domini, I appreciate your apology that maybe the communications haven't been the best. I would encourage that to change, and I think an opportunity to make some adjustments, this would go a long way, and I think you've heard that tonight and from some of us as well. I'm not going to be in favor of the final development plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg. Mr. Soriano?
No comments, thank you.
Mr. Tamarkin?
Also no comments.
Okay, and I also do not have any comments. So, hearing that, clerk, please call the roll.
Hicks,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
No.
Pollyea,
No.
Greenberg,
No.
Mako,
No.
Chapaca,
No.
Suriano.
Abstain.
Motion fails. So again, hearing correctly, if that motion has failed, then the design review is a moot point. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, we have an application. We have to do something with it.
Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to approve DR-0011-2024.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve application DR-0011-2024.
You have a motion by Mr. Hicks. Is there a second?
Second to Markin.
Second by DeMarkin. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I think the building looks great. I think it's going to be a great addition. I would like to be in support of this, but I can't because of the landscaping and the site plan. I think the request to go over 335 spaces, I know we don't have a true right to say we can't limit that, but I think the rest of the code is going to limit that with what you have to do with all the buffers. 275 more, I would be more inclined. That would be 70 less. It seems like those 70 would solve a lot of headache that we've heard tonight, which is the intent of the variance that you were asking for. The intent of the design was pretty much not to give you 70 more spaces. So I think that can come into play with it. So I will not be in support.
Thank you, Mr. Specker. Ms. Pollier.
Thank you. Echoing what I said before, I think that this is somewhat of an impossible situation. I definitely understand that with the development here. But I do think there's more that the property owner could do for the neighbors to assuage their fears and their concerns before I would be willing to be in favor. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Pollier. Mr. Hicks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only additional comment is the request for buffering by some of the neighbors I find unreasonable and not according to code. So I would be in support, again, of the plans that were submitted by the property owner.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Mr. Greenberg?
No further comments.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg. Mr. Siriano?
No further comments.
Mr. Tamarkin?
I'd just like to say that I think where we are now, it'd be important to just see an updated and revised plan, which hopefully we can see fairly soon.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tamarkin, and I have no additional comments. So with that, clerk, please call the roll.
Hicks,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
No.
Pollier,
No.
Greenberg,
No.
Mako,
No.
Shapaka,
No.
Suriano.
Abstain.
Motion fails. That completes our applications for tonight. Next agenda item, any unfinished business? Seeing none, any new business? Seeing none, official reports. Assistant City Attorney,
Nothing to report at this time.
Director of Planning.
Given that it's 9:32, I will not have comments from the Department of Planning, but from City Council standpoint, I would share that it was about 10 days ago that the rezoning, for the residential rezoning, just to the east of Valvoline, that Shagbark rezoning, that was approved by City Council. So at some point in time, Planning Commission will probably be seeing some plans for that development. I'll share that as staff, we haven't received anything as of yet. So it's probably many months away still. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Madam Mayor?
Actually, the only comments I would have would be to thank everyone who was here this evening and participated, everyone from the applicant to all of the residents that had your voices heard. As I've spoken to many of you, you know, that I don't have a role in this, but I like to attend these meetings so I can hear the questions that our Planning Commission is asking, the input from residents, our staff report as well. But this is the way the system is set up. It is created for you to provide a voice, to express your concerns, for Planning Commission to have the opportunity to ask you questions. So thanks to everyone for the exchange. I'm going to echo some of the comments I heard here that I look forward to perhaps some further engagement between the applicant and the residents. I think there are solutions from what I heard tonight, and I look forward to seeing that come back here very shortly. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your questions as always.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I have no official report at this time. Any correspondence or actions?
No, sir.
Okay. Poll members for comments. Mr. Shapaka.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Actually, it is very refreshing to have positive and negative comments to help us in our decision. If you don't show up one way or the other, I mean, we're just going to act upon, you know, our intuition, I guess. And I really appreciate the time limit. I mean, somebody was actually looking at the clock and ran away 3 minutes. He might have given you another 10, 13 seconds or something, but I thought that was pretty good at how she just kind of ding, she was done. We appreciate that. It was done in a timely manner. You guys did well. Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Pecca. Ms. Polly?
Just very briefly, I just want to echo what Mayor Jadlin said, and just thank everybody for coming today, making your voices known, making your voices heard. And I also think that's extremely important in a community, to make sure that people know what your opinion is and participate in the process. So thank you for that. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Polly. Mr. Hicks?
No further comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Mr. Greenberg?
No further comments.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg. Mr. Siriano?
Nope, no comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siriano. Mr. Tamarkin?
No comments.
My only comments are going to be just to thank everyone who is here in attendance. Especially appreciate the civility of the discourse tonight. As I've said before, and unfortunately I say it all the time, is that today's day and age, sometimes these public hearings unfortunately go off the rails. And I just want to, again, thank everyone for coming out and for conducting yourselves in a very civil and professional manner. So thank you for everyone. And I do want to apologize. I'm obviously suffering through a little bit of a cold right now, so I apologize for the sniffles and the coughs. So, so with that, motion to adjourn.
So moved.